Well, 52-51, Texas Tech survived a overtime scare against Abilene Christian. I know it was a very concerning game for many Texas Tech fans. Um, it definitely was a rough game, but it is a victory for Texas Tech. I mean, just imagine if Abilene Christian was able to uh, convert that 2-point conversion that the Red Raiders were able to stop. Defense finally rose up and got a stop. But man, it was it was you know what? It was Texas Tech football. I'm not going to say typical Tech. I mean, I kind of just did, but uh, it's hard following Texas Tech football sometimes. But again, victory. Uh, I'll go over some stats. Texas Tech allowed Abilene Christian to amass 615 total yards, 506 passing yards, 109 on the ground. Um, Abilene Christian converted 11 of 16 third downs, 1 of 2 on fourth down. The Wildcats ran 86 plays. So, and they averaged 7.2 yards per play. Now, Texas Tech's offense was pretty good as well. They amassed 539 yards, 378 passing yards. Bayer Morton was really good, 30 for 42, 378 yards, 5 touchdowns. Taj, 153 yards and a touchdown, averaged almost 6 yards per carry. So there were some good things from the Red Raiders on offense, but yeah, just hit me up with your questions. Y'all are starting to trickle in here. Hit me up with your questions because at this point, I've been talking Texas Tech football for like 10 hours. So with the radio show, Mighty Joe and I already did our day after podcast. We went ahead and recorded it. I was in the press conference, Joey McGuire's press conference as well. So I'd rather just answer your questions. Let's see. Purple Juice 88 says the defense can't be this bad, right? The talent is there, but very inexperienced. Well, I think you hit it on the head. There is talent. I mean, there is. And it's people are going to look at me and be like, you're crazy. But there is talent. But when I asked Joey McGuire, it was the first question in the press conference, I said, what happened on defense, basically, in so many words. And he said it was a combination of a lot of things. And he gave ACU credit. And their offensive coordinator, I was talking about on the radio, we had ACU's play-by-play guy on, and I asked about Coach Bowie, their new offensive coordinator. He's good, but they're going to face really good coaching staffs, really good offensive coordinators this year. I mean, next week against Washington State, it's going to be another air raid scheme, good offensive coordinator, good skill position players, and they have to play much better than they did. But McGuire did say several of the guys, it was their first starts, and they played like it, that's for sure. I don't think they could play much worse, especially in the secondary, giving up over 500 yards passing, I mean, against the FCS team. But, they didn't get much of a pass rush either. But I think the coverage was so bad they didn't give the pass rushers a chance to get to Maverick McIver, who had a tremendous game. Hat off to him. Tip the cap to his performance. But they have to play better. There was busted coverages. They were beat man for man in some situations, and they have to be better. I don't think they're this bad, but I think it is concerning that they could even play that bad, that there's a capability of them being that bad. By the way, I'm not even going to try and hide it. I'm having a drink. It's been a long day, and I almost stroked out when ACU lined up for that 2-point conversion because I was thinking of the repercussions if Texas Tech lost that game, which they didn't, thankfully for everybody. But Jason Baumgartner wants to know the status of Braylon Lux. Good question. McGuire said in the press conference they thought he was going to play today, but then he couldn't. And they think he'll be ready next week for Washington State. And he's their best cornerback, so that's good. That will help. He's one of the leaders. You wouldn't think it would be that big a deal against ACU, but it was. I mean, I'm not saying as an excuse that's the whole reason, but they could use Braylon Lux for sure, and he's supposed to be back next week. I mentioned it on Inside the Red Raiders. I don't know if it's been announced publicly. Maybe it was on one of the broadcasts, but I didn't hear the TV broadcast or anything or the radio. But Joseph Adedire is expected to miss the season too with the knee injury, and that's a terrible loss. Had a really good interview with him on this channel before the season, and I hate that, and it hurts the offensive line or outside linebacker depth with Dylan Spencer being out for the season, now Adedire, and then Charles Esters is going to be out at least a couple more weeks, McGuire said, after the game tonight. So outside linebacker, which we were talking about having so much depth now, is already taking a big hit. It's crazy how it's just like attacking one position like that. But they need guys like Amir Washington and Harvey Dyson to really step up. Have I ever seen Joey McGuire legit mad? Oh, no, he gets mad. He is also a very positive person, though. I think he's definitely be more likely to get after his players, kind of one of those coaching things when maybe they're riding too high, But he mentioned the defense when he went in the locker room. The players, they were hanging their heads, understandably so, and he was telling, "Hey, we won. Pick your head up." They have what they call like Truth Sunday or something like that, where they watch film and they basically look each other in the eyes and say, "Hey, this is what you need to do. This is what you did wrong. This is how you got to get better." I think, and then they move on to the next week after that, the next opponent. But I've seen him mad. I'm not going to point out situations, but yeah, he'll get after people for sure, especially like in practice and stuff like that. But part of his role is to put on a certain face in public and in press conferences. I don't see him like how that would help if he got all mad. All right. Brian Topless Bar said, "I couldn't watch. How did they tie it up? What happened to the offense in the third and fourth?" Yeah, offense. Well, I asked McGuire two questions because I thought there was two big problems. One I saw coming, which was the offensive line, and one I knew there was an experience. I talked about that, but I didn't think it would look that bad, especially not honestly against ACU. But you got to give ACU some credit, but also, the secondary, the breakdowns were so bad. They weren't even close in a lot of occasions. But what was your question again? The offensive line, they got pushed around. They didn't get a lot of push. There were some pre-snap penalties, and that's what McGuire talked about when I asked him about the offensive line. But Barron, he did have time in the pocket. There was good pass protection. He did throw for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think he was sacked once, but it was a coverage sack, to be honest. Taj had 157 yards or something like that and a touchdown. So, the offense did some good things, and you don't do that if your offensive line doesn't do some good things, but they weren't dominant. And that's usually why they stalled, was because of penalties or from the offensive line, or they just got, they didn't get enough movement in the run game. Jason has another question. He says, he's curious if my expectation for the win total for Tech changes after the showing. No, I think it's a little early. Now, am I concerned about the defense? Absolutely. I am. Barron looked better than I was expecting, to be quite honest, and just the offense in general. We'll see how the offensive line does against a different caliber of opponent. But the defense, that was troubling and it's concerning. And it's going to be something like Mighty Joe and I talked about this in our day after podcast and just to each other in the press box. Like, is this performance indicative of what this team is, what this defense is going to be, what this team is going to be this year, a la the 2014 team? Remember when Central Arkansas came in and nearly beat Texas Tech? Or you could say even go back to Houston Baptist, Bailey Zappi and Zach Kitley as offensive coordinator, almost beating Texas Tech. And they had 4-6 season in that COVID year. Or is it one of those where, man, we look back and say, remember how close they were to losing, but this ended up being a good season and how much better the defense got? That happens with teams. That happens during seasons. So I'm not ready. I'm not ready to call it either way. I'm not changing my win total based on this one game. If they had lost, obviously I would have. Just from a math perspective, but there's no doubt that was a troubling performance. But also, they did win, and I think I've been saying going into the season, I want to see what they do at Washington State. They haven't been very good on the road under Joey McGuire. They have won some games, some big games on the road. Like Baylor last year was really impressive. At Iowa State a couple of years ago, I think in November, it was a cold game, ugly game that they won. So they've shown a capability of doing that, but the record isn't good. Obviously, last year in Wyoming, that was not good. And this sets up a lot like Wyoming to me. To be honest, it's an outpost. Washington State, they're a good team. They could beat Texas Tech. They put up 70 on Portland. So I don't know how much you look into that other than the offense is capable of doing that. They're going to run a similar offense, air raid style, somewhat, very similar, not exactly, but very similar to what Tech saw tonight. And North Texas will as well with Eric Morris running the show. But I'm not ready to say, oh, the season's over. I get, like, one of the crazy things about college football specifically, even more than the NFL, is just week to week how reactive we all are with it. And this is what it means. And I don't know if it always translates like that. So let's see what they do at Washington State. And they go and get blown out, the defense looks terrible again or something like that, then it's like, okay. But I'm not ready to say, this team is terrible and they're going to, win less games than I originally thought. Brian Topless Bar says he's got 2 fingers of Booker's in my glass. Well, cheers, brother. Like I said, I don't do this a lot. I do, like my fair share of drinks, but not while I'm doing a video. But hey, this is my YouTube channel. It's not even on the site or anything. So whatever. If you're offended, oh well. But to those of you who understand, I needed a drink tonight. Cheers. Team Crop Duster said, you asked the first question of the presser. He handles press conferences well and answers honestly. He does. Yeah, he's a straightforward dude. And thing is McGuire's like that, away from the public eye. Some guys have covered a lot of coaches, a lot of different levels of multiple sports at this point. And some coaches are really cool and suave, like when the camera's on, and then right when it's off, they become a different person. That's who McGuire is. And he's very generous to everyone with his time. Even tonight, somebody at Tech tried to basically take the mic from me. And I was like, can I ask another question? I always ask 2 questions. I've been doing this, spend all this time to get to this point and ask the head coach questions after the game. And they try to take the mic. If I had asked like 3 or 4 questions, then I get it, take it. But I mean, this is my 12th season. I put in the work and the time. I was out there for 9 hours, which is great. It's an honor and a privilege, but at least let me ask the second question. And McGuire said, yeah, go ahead, which I appreciate because I was like, come on, man. So he's very generous with his time. And I do appreciate that. I think that's one of the reasons why he gets so many favorable write-ups and interviews and stuff from people is because, let's be honest, I mean, how would you in your job, if a customer or client or somebody wanting to be or trying to do business with you, if they treat you a certain way, of course you're going to want to reciprocate that. So that's one of the reasons you see media liking, and just people in general liking McGuire. He's a very likable person, very generous with his time, and he's very genuine for somebody who's basically almost in a politician's role. A Power 4 head coach, their job is almost very similar to politicians, though hopefully not as jaded, of course. Vic Daddy says, Wreck 'em 1-0. That's a true statement. We're going to talk. There are some negative things to go over, clearly, but Texas Tech is 1-0. Imagine if they lost that game. Imagine if ACU had converted that 2-point conversion and Tech lost. How would this conversation be? And I'm not going to lie. I was about as nervous as I've been in Tech football, right there. It's up there in the last 12 years, just because the repercussions. I mean, it's almost like the season would be over. Now, that's not the case. That's a little dramatic, but it was like they cannot lose this game, and it was there. I mean, I wasn't thinking Tech was going to stop ACU on that 2-point conversion, but for what a great game the offensive coordinator, Coach Boo, I can't remember maybe it's Mike or so, I can't remember his first name, but he came from Valdosta State last year, where they were like they like led the country or something in offense. So he's a good offensive coordinator. But that call was not good. And like even Mighty Joe called it. And I was thinking too, with that formation, they were spreading it out to run a quarterback draw. And McGuire said something in the postgame press conference about them thinking it was either going to be screen where they had the 4 receivers bunched up top, or, it was kind of like a read or a quarterback draw. And they numbers wise took away the screen, and rightfully so, the coaches will be criticized, but it was really smart. They took a timeout after seeing that formation. ACU came out in the exact same formation after that timeout, and they forced the quarterback draw based on numbers. And then finally, some guys stepped up and made a play when they had to. And Amir Washington, who didn't have the kind of game I was expecting him to have, but he did help kind of collapse or set the edge there on that run. And then Jaden Cofield, who I've been talking about for a lot of the offseason, stepped up and got that tackle for loss. So at least they got the win there. Let's see. What else do we have? Man, okay. Brian Topless-Bar, it's early candidate for my favorite handle here. He said this season, he said, I heard the question about Hudson playing time. Is that an injury thing? Is he truly not one of our best 3 at this time? Well, he's not the most experienced. And all the guys that were playing that were inexperienced were getting torched, let's be honest. And some of those guys, whether it be like Trey Cleveland, Maverick McIver, Jed Castles, these old Red Raiders, even some of the other guys that weren't former Red Raiders that had experience were kind of beating up the Tech players who had little or no experience. You had Josh Kelly at 10 catches, his exact stat line. It's loading up here, but he had 10 catches, a touchdown, 156 yards. Coy Aiken, another veteran, 5 catches, 76 yards, 2 scores. Jalen Conyers, senior, 5 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown, and that 2-point conversion run, which ended up being a big deal. Caleb Douglas caught that touchdown in overtime, and that's where Micah would play. And honestly, I wanted to see Micah as much as anybody, and I'm as big a believer in him. And the plan was to get Micah, and he did play some. He was actually open on one play when the play call was away from him, but he was running down the seam out of the slot. He was wide open. And then he was in there when Conyers caught that long fade as well, I believe. So he played some, but at the end, they needed veteran dudes, guys they knew exactly what they were supposed to do. And so, I mean, you can't fault Caleb Douglas being in there, especially on that 3rd and 11 or 12 in overtime when he caught what ended up being the game-winning touchdown and extra point. So he's not injured. I expect Micah to figure in heavily. He's a true freshman. I understand people wanting to see him. I mean, we've been talking about him, highest rated recruit, all this. I mean, I don't fault anybody for asking or wanting to see him, but he's not hurt. He will play more moving forward. They wanted guys, older veterans they trusted in there. I mean, they needed every point, every play they got. So no fault for me. Team Crop Dusters, another great handle, said, cheers, man, cheers. Big Daddy, cheers, brother. Thank you, Crop Dusters. He said, I'm great at my job. Well, it's an honor and a privilege. I was right about something on the defense with Cofield. I'm hanging my hat on that. I was right about Josh Kelly, which that didn't take a whole lot. I mean, everybody could see that. But Cofield was something that just kind of happened where he stood out to me in practice, and I heard something from a player. And then McGuire that day was talking about him dominating the scrimmage. So I'm glad I was right about one positive thing on the defense from fall camp that translated to the opener. Yeah, he does. I'll tell you what, he's really powerful. And he's really quick off the snap, especially for just a redshirt freshman. That usually takes a year or so, which, he's been in the program a year. But Cofield is somebody I think is going to be really good for Texas Tech. Has someone asked about the lack of Micah Hudson? Yeah, I just talked about it. He was asked in the postgame presser. He's not hurt. I expect him to play more. They wanted to play veteran guys in the close game. Jason said he was truly afraid if they lost this game, people would start wanting to put some heat on Joey's seat, and that would have made him sad. He says he really thought when we kicked the field goal, it was over. And yeah, I did too, but they held him to a field goal, and then they ended up holding out on the 2-point conversion. So, I mean, there is something in that they won, because this would be completely different if they lost. I'm not saying you shouldn't have reservation or be upset at the performance. I mean, it's your fandom, do with it what you will, but I'm saying like what makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. But at least they won. And I'm holding off judgment at least till next week. I want to see how they do at Washington State. Because I'm not going to throw the whole teams get better from, they make the biggest improvement after the first week of the season from game 1 to game 2. Okay. I mean, there's some truth in that. But I want to see what adjustments they make. I want to see if these young guys in the secondary actually learn something. I want to see the coaches, coach these guys up this week, because I know you see a lot of teams when they struggle, like Florida State against Boston College. I'm not sure if they played already, actually, but I was expecting Florida State to kick Boston College's butt after coming off that loss. The fear of failure or in being ridiculed and criticized a lot of time, if you have pride, has people bounce back. Like you see, even like in the NFL, if a team gets crushed one week, the next week they come out and kick somebody, somebody who's favored over them, they kick their butts. And it's because, there's a lot of tape to see them struggling. They get coached up. They're hyper-focused. They have some pride, and it matters. So let's see what happens. And I don't want to jinx it, but I really don't think, even tonight, I did consider it, but I don't think there's anything on the field that could put Joey McGuire's job status in jeopardy. There's just too much invested in him. Again, he's a very likable person. There's so many things going right with the program, despite some of the results. They struggle early in seasons. I don't know what it is about, but they've been really strong in November, the first 2 years under McGuire. And that's something that Tech really hasn't been. They usually start off, they do well in non-conference, and then they struggle, and then November is just, terrible. But it's been different under McGuire. It's been kind of the opposite. So hopefully they can get things back on track again for next week, and at least they got out with the win tonight. There's a lot of laughing and crying from this dude. Rick, thank you. Yeah, you said, Crop Duster said it was Rick Bowie. He said, if you watched the end of the game, handshake, McGuire went up to Bowie and talked to him for a minute. Yeah, he said that McGuire said in the postgame presser that he went and told him that, you called a great game and had a great game plan and all that. And he did. Ryan Evans says, is it just me or are we extra small on the defensive line? Well, I don't have the roster. Why do I have the roster? Their starters were like Tech starter, because I saw that was on the game thread too. I don't know if it's the uniforms or what, but they make Tech look smaller, but they're over 300 pounds across the D line. Your outside linebackers are like 270 and 250. Your inside, Ben Roberts is 6'3", 230. Jacob Rodriguez is a little shorter, but he's 230. I mean, CJ Baskerville is a pretty big safety. No, Tech's not small. They're like, most of the guys are like 6'2", 305. Quincy Ledette's like 325, and he's actually slimmed down to be 325. So it's not a small defense. They're actually bigger than they were, because, Jalen Hutchings and Tony Bradford were great. I love those guys. But they were undersized defensive linemen. So Tech's actually much bigger on the defensive line than what we're used to seeing. Somebody said we small. Huh? I disagree. Yes, cheers. Topless. See ya. Hopefully after Texas Tech gets the dub on the road. Why was it so close? Well, it was so close because the defense was atrocious. Defense was terrible. Right? There's no sugarcoating it. Yeah, there were some inexperienced guys, but they played like I got to kind of edit myself. I don't want to use just common phrases, but it was just absolute poor defense, terrible defense from Texas Tech. In the secondary, linebackers weren't much better. How many wheel routes did we see them run with the running backs? And McGuire mentioned that I think maybe the defense was a little, some of the calls from the secondary were a little too complicated for inexperienced guys. He said they actually tried to simplify things, went straight man, but then they started torturing with some of those wheel routes. And the linebacker, I think the biggest thing for me was seeing Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts struggle in coverage, because I just didn't expect that. They're pretty quick. I'm not saying they're burners, but they're good athletes and quick. and they struggled. I mean, they could not defend those wheel routes. So, I mean, if you're Washington State, you see that, you're like, man, how many wheel routes are we going to run? So they're going to have to fix that. They got to make some adjustments, and I think they need to simplify some of the calls at least early on for those inexperienced defensive backs. Yeah, somebody said Crop Duster says they'll make Joey fire a coordinator before they fire him. If you had to get, absolutely. Connor said Tech sucks. Okay. One thing about Joey's teams, this is Kobe Robbins, says they like to play games close. They came away with the win. Many teams struggle on game one. He's not panicked yet. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But it was alarming, the defense, to say the least. ACU quarterback Maverick McGuire had all day in the backfield, said James Campbell. Well, I mean, on one hand, no, he was not pressured much at all, but his receivers were open so fast. Clearly, the game plan was to get the ball out fast, and that may just be a staple of their offense. But also, I mean, you got to cover for longer than a second, and they were getting burnt right off the line. So Maverick was just firing away. Guys were like open by 5 yards. I mean, they looked like high school in terms of like how open they were. And the higher you get, the less open receivers are, if that makes sense, and it looked like a high school game in terms of how open they were. You just don't see that at high level college football, we didn't see a high level college football defense. And you certainly almost never see that in the NFL. Maybe a busted play here or there, but not consistently just that open and that quickly. So, I mean, I'm not saying Washington State isn't going to try to employ the same game plan, but I don't know if that's indicative of the pass rush overall for this season, but that certainly was the case tonight. Jason Baumgartner said, he will say the stadium was amazing. So glad for the win in the first showing. Yeah, South End Zone was great. Really walking like we do the Rock and pregame on Rock 101.1 across University, right there at Red Ritter Outfitter, across from the Jones, and going to all these media availabilities and practices. I was coming from the west side parking lot, so I hadn't really walked over from across University and see the skywalk, just the overhang, how open the stadium is right there in the south end zone, how you could see through there, and it looked amazing. It really did. Like it, I've been out there dozens of times. I don't know, in the last month or so, and today I was the most impressed. Like, wow, it really is coming along. The football facility is going to look amazing. You see the outside like facade or whatever, and it looks great. It's going to be really amazing. Once it's completed. I will say though, and I'm going to sound like I got this gray in my beard, but there's a lot of people on Inside the Red Raiders and people just around the stadium I talked to saying that the experience is kind of weird because the music's played so loud and it's constantly pumping music and not really getting to just sit there and enjoy being at, a college football stadium or hear the band, the going band. So I'm curious if anybody else, has any experience to share what they thought about the overall game day experience outside just the stadium being awesome. All right. Crop Duster says one thing he misses about Leach era is how quick they got open and how fast QBs got rid of it. Yeah, ACU did remind me of that. You're right. That's a good point. Yeah, if you Britt B says, how do I listen to your Rockin' pregame show live? He says, look for it on game days over and over, but can never find it. We are now we one thing that's kind of confusing is during the football season, the times change. We're always, based on when Tech's playing. And like today we were 3 to 5. So I think next week will be 5:30, either 6 to 8 or 5:30 to 7:30. I'll have to give my producer. But if you go to Rock 101.1, if you just Google that, Lubbock, Rock 101.1, there's a you can listen live. There's just a little whatever media deal where you just hit play, and you, no matter when it's playing, you could listen to the station live. So I'll post. If you follow my handle, if you follow my Twitter account at Johnson Jarrett, capital J's, both of those. I'll post that sometime during the week in terms of a link to where you could listen live. Jason said, yeah, the music has been too much for years. Sounds like the sound system was better, though. Not as garbled. Yeah, that's good. Shine says, I'm only 27 and my ears were genuinely hurting most of the game. Music was definitely a bit too loud this time around. Could also hardly hear the announcer during the first half. And you know what's funny is I listen to music loud. I always have. It's probably why I'm like half deaf. But I like loud music, loud bass, all that. And it was shaking the windows of the press box. So I don't know. It makes me feel so old. I'm really not that kind of dude, but I thought it's crazy how loud the music was tonight. Katie Rader says, pathetic, plain and simple. The return on investment is not good. I mean, on one hand, I agree with you, but on the other, they did win. I keep going back to that. And I'm not trying to be apologetic because I think it was terrible to the point of being angry at how bad the defense was and how they couldn't adjust up until they made those plays to win. And you could say, hey, it's ACU and you're at home. And you're right. I'm not going to put up a big fight against that. But if Tech responds, excuse me, need a drink. If Tech ends up having the type of season, I don't know what type of season you're expecting. I predicted 8-4 going into the season. If they end up having that kind of season, we'll look back and be like, man, remember how bad the defense was? Remember how close that game was? All that matters is they got the W. Now, if this is a precursor of what to expect, they way underperform, like those kind of expectations I have or had going into the season, then it'll just be like, man, they showed us in game one. So it really just depends on what they do the rest of the season. Because 1-0 is 1-0. As Bill Parcells said, you are what your record is. Kay said they did not win. Patterson gave them a bone as he already won. They won. It's 1-0. So that's a very real answer. One will remember this game if we get 9 wins. Yeah, it just depends on the rest of the season. At least they did win, so they put themselves in a position to have that. Because if they lost tonight, then I'm not saying the season would have been over, but that's just been one of the worst losses in program history, and the whole fan base the whole fan base is kind of reeling right now anyway. Let's be honest, but would have been even so much worse, exponentially worse, if ACU had actually won that game, gotten that 2-point conversion, and Tech lost. So, I do think there's a dip. With all due respect, Katie Rader, I get what you're saying, but that's not what happened. Tech did win. All right, I'm losing my voice and all that. So, we have any more questions? Or I might wrap this up a little earlier than usual. Next week, win or lose, I'll probably go. Well, I don't know. It's going to be pretty late next week, but I'll definitely do at least another 30 minutes next week. Thank you, Crop Dusters. Yeah, Ryan, you mentioned that I think the uniforms does make it look like they're smaller because, like I said, I was seeing some responses. Some of the responses, some of the comments were like, they were so, Tech is so small. And I was like, man, I'm looking at the roster, 305, 320, 300 across the board. Outside linebackers, 270, 260. That's not small. That's big for about anybody. Again, I guess you could say Jacob Rodriguez is smaller. He's 230 inside linebacker. Ben Roberts is 6'3", 230 and can run. So it's not a small defense. The backups aren't small. Maybe it's just the cut of the uniforms. James Campbell said, ugly win over pretty loss. Take it every time. Yeah, I'm old. It was too loud, but the light drone show was well worth it. You know what's funny is I missed that because it was right before the fourth quarter. I had to go to the bathroom, man. And I was waiting. I was like, hey, I'm going to run. It's kind of down a long hallway. So I was like, trying to take off, but I missed the drone show. But I'm looking forward to it in a couple weeks against UNT. All right. I think that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. Tech is 1-0. We'll see how they do. How they do next week. But we'll have tons of content. We'll have the day after podcast tomorrow on Inside the Red Raiders. Mighty Joe probably already has Jaeger shots posted. I'm not sure. That's a free story. Check it out. Shameless plug. We're offering 75% off for a year. Right now, it's our best deal of the year. It's only going to last a couple days. So if you're interested, jump on it. We're always talking Texas Tech sports and recruiting there. But if not, hey, thanks for being on the channel and really appreciate it.